Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back. Wait, I should grab the books before we get going. I always do that to myself. Hello. In case you missed it a few days ago, Miss Suzanne Collins announced that there is going to be a 5th installment in the Hunger Games saga. The original trilogy came out in the late 2000s and branching into the early 2010s, and then this one, the prequel, came out a few years ago. When did this come out, actually? 2020. Should we set these up in the background? Nice little backdrop. I'll need one of them eventually. What do we think? And that's called set dressing. So we have covered extensively the Hunger Games on this channel. In fact, I basically owe Suzanne Collins my entire subscriber count at this point. So of course, when the book comes out in March of next year, March 18th, if my memory serves, I will be reading it and making a video on it, never fear. But I thought it would be fun for us to take a second and do some predictions. What do I think is gonna happen in this book? And if you are a subscriber, then you know that when I do predictions, I like to do a lot of my actual predictions, right? Like, what do I actually think is gonna happen? And then I like to rope in a few curveballs, right? Like, I like to throw a dart at a wall and just like throw some crazy predictions out there, because every once in a while when you do that, you turn out to be right, and nothing feels better than literally like throwing out the most like random crazy prediction on planet Earth and being right. It's so fun. So while I was kind of coming up with my predictions for what's going to happen in this new book, which of course we will dive into all the details of in a second, one of the things that I thought of is like, what if haymitch isn't the main character? What if somebody else is the main character? And the more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself, and guys, I hate to admit it, but like, I actually don't think haymitch is going to be the main character anymore. I convinced myself. It's not a far-fetched theory anymore, it's my main theory. So I'm going to present my theory to you here in YouTube video format. And that's what you're watching right now, in case you got lost. You're watching a YouTube video. Hi, my name's Meredith. Okay, let's dive in. So, actually, let me pull up what Miss Suzanne has actually said about the book. Yes, I was right. March 18th, 2025. Begins with the reaping of the 50th Hunger Games, set 24 years before the original Hunger Games novel, which came out in 2008, and 40 years after Collins' most recent book, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Lionsgate, which has released film adaptations of all 4 previous Hunger Games books, announced later on Thursday that Sunrise on the Reaping will open in theaters on November 20th, 2026. Francis Lawrence, who has worked on all but the first Hunger Games movie, will return as director. Okay, here's what Suzanne Collins actually said about this book. With Sunrise on the Reaping, I was inspired by David Hume's idea of implicit submission and, in his words, the easiness with which the many are governed by the few, Collins said in a statement. The story also lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day. So why do people think haymitch is going to be the main character? In case you're not a Hunger Games aficionado, let me explain. Haymitch is the mentor for Katniss and Peeta in the original trilogy. So the mentors for the Hunger Games are people from the same district who have won the Hunger Games in the past. Haymitch is the only victor from District 12 that's still alive. There's only been one other victor from District 12, and she is the winner. Oh wait, let me say quickly, I am not going to be being careful about spoiling anything about any of these books, so if you don't want anything spoiled for the current Hunger Games trilogy or the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, this just might not be the video for you, because I think it's way more fun if I can just talk openly about the stuff that's happened in those books. So, appreciate you. See you in the next one if that's not for you. Now that I have that warning, Lucy Gray, wait, I put the books over here. Lucy Gray is the winner of the Hunger Games in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So haymitch was Katniss and Peeta's mentor in the original trilogy. He's the only other winner from District 12 of the Hunger Games besides them and Lucy Gray. And Lucy Gray was obviously long gone, possibly dead by the time this all went down. We don't know. Haymitch was the winner of the second quarter quell, which is the 50th Hunger Games. So in book, in universe, the Hunger Games happen every year, and every 25 years they do something extra special and extra horrific with them, and they call them quarter quells. So in the second quarter quell, which was the 50th Hunger Games, they reaped twice as many, what are they called? Tributes, that's the word they use. They reaped twice as many tributes, and so the Hunger Games was like twice as big as it normally was. They got 4 from each district instead of 2, and haymitch is the winner of the 50th Hunger Games. So that's why when they said this one's going to be about the 50th Hunger Games, everybody's like, oh my god, we're getting a haymitch book. We're getting a haymitch perspective book. Another important thing to note, all of these books have been in first person singular. So the first 3 books, the original trilogy, is narrated entirely by Katniss. We never get anybody else's perspective through those books. It's always narrated by Katniss. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is entirely narrated by Coriolanus Snow, who goes on to become President Snow, who is like the big villain of the original trilogy. So that's why everybody thinks that haymitch is going to be the main character of this book, because Haymitch won those Hunger Games, and we know that already. And if Haymitch is kind of like the center character, then we will watch the book through his perspective. That's why it matters. So we'll be looking through his eyes at everything if she sticks with the same perspective that she's written all these other books with. So why do I think that may not be the case? Why do I think this book might be from a different character's perspective? I'm sure Haymitch will appear. I'm 100% positive he'll appear at some point. But why do I think he maybe isn't the main character? So going back to what Suzanne Collins said inspired this book, David Hume's idea of implicit submission and, in his words, the easiness with which the many are governed by the few. Collins said in a statement, the story also lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day. So that got me thinking, that got my brain churning, because this book is going to be about propaganda and power and submission and control. Then I started to think about the different perspectives we've had of the Hunger Games to date. So up to now, we've had two different perspectives on the Hunger Games. We've had perspectives from tributes, right? Katniss went to the Hunger Games twice, and both those times we watched the Hunger Games through her eyes. In the prequel, in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we watched the Hunger Games through the perspective of a mentor. Now, the mentorship at that point looked very different to how it looked in the original trilogy, but still, we saw the Hunger Games from the perspective of a mentor who was trying to help the tribute win, but was not within the Hunger Games themselves. Also, at one point, Coriolanus does go into the arena, so we do get a little bit of the arena view from his eyes, but it's all through his perspective. We don't see Lucy Gray's perspective. So, what perspectives are left, right? She could do another character going into the Hunger Games, and she may very well do that. Haymitch might be the main character of this book. I could be wrong about all of this, and I'm totally okay if I am, okay? And I am prepared for like all of the comments after that to be like, oh, this video didn't age well. It's fine. We're just having fun here, okay? But that's already a perspective that Suzanne Collins has explored and given us. And not only that, but we already have a play-by-play description of Haymitch's Hunger Games, which we'll jump to in a minute, because that's going to become important. In Catching Fire, they watch the tape of Haymitch's Hunger Games, Katniss and Peeta, I mean. So we have a play-by-play of exactly what happens in that Hunger Games, which also leads me to believe that she might have concluded that the reader would not have that much fun reading just from Haymitch's perspective, because we already know exactly what's going to happen, unless she just wants to give us more detail. If Haymitch is the main character, then most likely the Hunger Games themselves just aren't going to be a major portion of the book. Maybe they'll be more of like a blur kind of thing. We'll get a lot beforehand, we'll get a lot afterhand. Afterhand? That's not a word. Is it? Beforehand, afterwards, I think is how you would say that. So we'll get a lot beforehand, we'll get a lot afterwards of Haymitch, but the Hunger Games themselves might be more of a blur. They might just go by really quickly, or it might genuinely be kind of like a, he doesn't remember it that clearly, and so it's not given to us that clearly, and we get like snippets and vignettes, and it's more of like a representation like that than it is like an actual plot by plot. And most of the book is going to be what happens before the Hunger Games and then what happens after the Hunger Games. That is a possibility. Or Haymitch is not the main character. But if he isn't, who is? What other perspectives are we missing? What have we not really seen the perspective of? There's two that I could think of. We have not yet seen the Hunger Games through the eyes of a game maker, but I think everybody would feel pretty cheated if Suzanne Collins wrote a book about Haymitch's Hunger Games and then basically invented a random character we've either never met or was a passing name in a random book. Actually, when we get to my theory, I guess that's kind of what it is, but wait a second. I'm building up to it, okay? This is called storytelling. I'm taking you on a journey, okay? We could see a game maker that we've maybe met, maybe haven't. Or the other perspective we haven't seen is the perspective of somebody who has nothing to do with the Hunger Games themselves. Somebody who's just a spectator, maybe has a loved one within the Hunger Games, but isn't a mentor, isn't a game maker, isn't in the Hunger Games, is just watching from the outside. So do you see why when she said it's going to be about propaganda and how they control the masses and like how the few control the many and all of that, why I think it's a possibility that the perspective that we're actually going to get is somebody who isn't involved with the Hunger Games at all, somebody who's just a spectator. But if they're just a spectator, why would they become the main character of the story? There has to be a reason. And that is why, class, get your Catching Fire books out. Get your books out. Class, turn to page 196. This is when Katniss and Peeta are watching the tape of the 50th Hunger Games, the one that Haymitch was in. They're watching the reaping portion. By the time we get to District 12, I'm completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of kids going to certain death. There's a woman, not Effie, calling the names in 12, but she still begins with, ladies first. She calls out the name of a girl who's from the steam. You can tell by the look of her. And then I hear the name, Maisie Donner. Oh, I say, she was my mother's friend. The camera finds her in the crowd, clinging to 2 other girls, all blonde, all definitely merchants' kids. I think that's your mother hugging her, says Peeta quietly. And he's right. As Maisie Donner bravely disengages herself and heads for the stage, I catch a glimpse of my mother at my age, and no one has exaggerated her beauty. Holding her hand and weeping is another girl who looks just like Maisie, but a lot like someone else I know, too. Madge, I say. That's her mother. She and Maisie were twins or something, Peeta says. My dad mentioned it once. I think of Madge's mother, Mayor Undersea's wife, who spends half her life in bed immobilized with a terrible pain, shutting out the world. I think of how I never realized that she and my mother shared this connection, of Madge showing up in that snowstorm to bring the painkiller for Gale, of my Mockingjay pin and how it means something completely different now that I know that its former owner was Madge's aunt, Maisie Donner, a tribute, who was murdered in the arena. I think that Madge's mother and Maisie Donner's sister is the main character of this new book. And not only that, I am going to go so far as to speculate, and this is pure speculation, but because we've had a love element in every one of these books, I am going to go so far as to speculate that whatever her name is, we're not given her name here. I'm going to presume it starts with an M, though, because we've got Maisie and Madge, that Madge's mom is going to be romantically linked to Haymitch before the Hunger Games begin. So she's obviously going to be heartbroken by this reaping, not just because her sister got reaped, but also because the man that she loves got reaped. Boy, he's a child. They're all children. This is going to lead to her wanting to rebel or revolt in some way, try to help in some way, I'm not really sure. But we're going to get kind of a spectator's view from somebody who's very invested in the Hunger Games, and maybe we're going to see a lot of her mixed emotions as she's obviously terribly upset by the fact that she will only get one of these individuals back if she gets either of them back at all. But again, we're talking about propaganda and submission and all of that. That's what Suzanne Collins said it's about. And so I'm wondering if what we're going to see is a lot of her like internal mixed emotions as she balances her sorrow and grief over losing one, if not both, of these loved ones of hers with some of the propaganda and brainwashing that comes out of the Capitol and kind of where that puts her mentally. I'm also wondering what happens when Haymitch gets back to District 12 at that point, if they try to pick up their love connection again or anything like that. I'm not really sure. My prediction is that they're going to attempt to pick up their love connection when Haymitch comes back. It's not going to feel the same. There's going to be some resentment over the fact that he came back and not her sister, possibly. But also, it's been hinted, and I didn't actually find this passage in Mockingjay, so I'm sure you guys will correct me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, and please do. But I'm pretty sure at some point Haymitch also kind of mentions that he didn't want to submit right away when the Hunger Games ended, and the Capitol ended up hurting a bunch of people that he loved in order to get him to submit. And Katniss talks about how Madge's mom is in bed immobilized with terrible pain and shutting out the world. And so I don't know if it's going to end up being emotional pain like PTSD, or it's going to be physical pain that was caused to her by the Capitol in order to torture Haymitch. Not 100% sure. But that is what I think this book is going to be about, and that's what I think is going to happen. And I am going to be sat for it. I'm so excited. But if it is about Haymitch, it's not that I'm not excited. If we got a Haymitch perspective, then I would be super excited. I would be very surprised if she gives us an in-depth description of the Hunger Games, because after this part of this scene, we see basically Haymitch's entire Hunger Games over the course of like a few pages, and like how he ends up winning and stuff. So that's where I'm saying I just don't think she's going to write about it in depth. It'll be in there. It'll be talked about for sure, but I don't think it's going to be in depth. We're either going to see it from Madge's mom's perspective from the outside of the Hunger Games, or we're going to see it from Haymitch's perspective and it's just going to brush through and give us like snippets, or she's going to do none of that and I'm wrong about everything. That's also a possibility. Okay, let's get this back in here. So interestingly enough, I found out about this announcement because my Hunger Games video, specifically my Mockingjay one, started blowing up all of a sudden again. Although it has been for the past few weeks, and so did they hint at it? Did they hint that they were going to make an announcement about it? Because 2 or 3 weeks ago, all of my Hunger Games videos started getting a ton of views again. And I was just like, okay, people say the YouTube algorithm is finicky and sometimes random stuff like that happens, so I didn't think that much of it. But I saw a comment from somebody talking about the announcement of the new book, and I was like, oh, maybe that's why I've been getting so many comments. So then I thought the announcement happened a few weeks ago, and I was super behind because, like I said, the video started blowing up again a few weeks ago, but that does not seem to be the case. So I don't know if y'all just like predicted that this announcement was going to happen or if they teased it or something. Not really sure. But anyway, the comment had asked if people thought that we were going to see why Tigress and Coriolanus don't talk anymore by the time we get to this trilogy. I think so, because I think Suzanne Collins has done a pretty good job up to this point with the prequel in answering questions that the reader might not have even realized that they had about the original trilogy. There's some speculation as to whether or not Katniss is a descendant of Lucy Gray's or if she's a descendant of one of the other of the Covey, especially because they're very musical and Katniss can sing and her dad could sing very well. So there was some thought that her dad was going to be the child of one of the Covey. I imagine we'll meet Katniss's dad for the first time because we haven't met him yet. I imagine we'll meet Katniss's mom as well. I imagine we'll find out if she's related to the Covey and how she's related to the Covey if she is. And I do imagine we will also find out why Tigress and Coriolanus are disconnected. I don't know if it's going to happen in the book, in the plot itself. Like, I don't know if we're going to watch it go down, but I would be very surprised if we didn't find out in this book why Tigress wants to help take down Coriolanus by the time you get to Katniss and Peeta's events in the Hunger Games. Other predictions, I don't think Lucy Gray is going to come back, and I don't think we're going to find out any more information about her specifically. I think Suzanne Collins put way too much work into all the foreshadowing that she was going to disappear without a trace, and that is kind of part of Coriolanus's torture, is that he doesn't get to know what actually happened to her and where she went, and it mimics this song that like popped up during the book, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think we're gonna find out what happened to Lucy Gray. So if you were looking for that, sorry, I think you're gonna end up being disappointed. I could be wrong. But even though I do think that Maisley's sister, Madge's mother, is going to be the main character of this book, it is a possibility that Haymitch is still the main character, but I do still want to give you a few far-fetched predictions. I put no stock in any of these, and I'm probably wrong about all of them. What if Katniss's dad is Lucy Gray's baby, but she like ships the baby back to the districts because she can't take care of the baby wherever it is she ended up? Or somehow they meet in the woods, Katniss's dad and Katniss's mom, because Katniss's dad isn't mentioned in the scene of the reaping. We see her mom, but we don't see her dad, so maybe he wasn't there. Maybe he moved to the districts voluntarily to be with her mom, which would be crazy, but we'll see. Like I said, these are very far-fetched predictions. I don't actually think that's true, but how funny would it be if he ended up being Lucy Gray's son or something? We don't find out what happened to Lucy Gray, but we do end up finding out that the baby is hers. Other far-fetched predictions. It says it starts with the reaping of the 50th Hunger Games, but it does not say when it ends. What if the timeline stretches far enough that we actually see the birth of Katniss? Who's to say? It could happen. I don't think it will, but it could. A somewhat real, somewhat not real prediction, I think, is that Haymitch at some point is going to cave and like be submissive in some way. The reason I am putting this in the far-fetched section, because you might be thinking that's not that far-fetched, but I think because we do know, right, that like some people around him got hurt because he wouldn't do what the Capitol asked him to do. I'm pretty sure. Are we not pretty sure? I could be so wrong about that. I will be so floored as to where my brain came up with that if that is not true. But I think that at some point in Mockingjay it talks about that. And so that's why I think it's kind of far-fetched to say that at some point he does cave, because we know that people around him got hurt. So I think it will take the people around him getting hurt for him to cave and behave and do what the Capitol wants. My real prediction is that before then he's not going to be submissive at all. But my fun far-fetched prediction is that he actually will have been submissive, but they hurt his family anyway just to show him that they could. Like, they got him to agree, but he was still, like, on the fence about it, or he was still being somewhat difficult, or even though he was doing what they wanted, they were worried that he was going to, at some point, branch away and do something else, and so they hurt people just to show him that they could, even though he was doing what they asked him to do. And my final balls-to-the-wall prediction is that there will be a dog. Someone will have a dog, and there will be a dog that is, like, a core piece of this story. Could happen. Someone could have a dog. Someone might have a pet dog, and that dog might be really important. You don't know. Dogs exist. There might be a dog in this book. Now I just kind of want to talk about things that I'm like so sure we're going to see that I'm very excited about them. And that's just whatever the Hunger Games is going to look like in the middle. Because we've seen the really early Hunger Games and how just absolutely brutal they were. Just a bunch of kids in a coliseum with weapons and people saying kill each other. And we saw some of the early like genetically engineered animals and all of that. But it was just like a tiny bit. and otherwise they really wanted the tributes to just kill each other with weapons, and they were just locked in a coliseum. I think that this Hunger Games will be in an arena. I think it'll be far enough later that they'll have it in an arena instead of in that coliseum thing. And I'm really excited to see like what that intermediary point is, because I don't think it will be as technologically advanced as the 74th and 75th Hunger Games that we saw in the original trilogy, but I also don't think it will be as primitive as the 10th Hunger Games. And that's kind of a given, like I said. Like, that's not even really a prediction, because we pretty much know that to be true. And I'm really excited about that, because I'm excited to see kind of how things developed and like what developed first and what aspects of this they have. I don't want to say too much actually about Haymitch's Hunger Games, because if you don't remember, you might not want to reread the passage from Catching Fire, because then you wouldn't know, and it would be more of a surprise if it does take you through the Hunger Games a little bit more. So I'm not going to go in depth about what they show, but we do know some of the technology that they had because they showed it in that little snippet, and I don't think she's going to break away from that. She's too good an author for that. So whatever she shows of this Hunger Games will match what she wrote in Catching Fire. I 100% believe that. And I'm just really excited to see where the Capitol is at and where the Hunger Games are at, and just to read more. I mean, Suzanne Collins is such a good author, and these books are so, like, especially rereading them as an adult. Like, I did not appreciate when I was a kid the commentary that was happening. I just continue to be so floored and impressed. The more I think about it, the crazier it seems to me that she was able to do that. And while kids maybe didn't catch everything she was saying, we certainly caught some of it. And I felt like I understood the story. I understood what was happening, and I certainly hated the Capitol. And I hated the idea of people who had all this wealth at the expense of others. Even if I didn't understand that she was directly referencing America and our relationship with other economies around the world, and even to our own impoverished within the country, and like even if I didn't catch that like her commentary like applied to real life, like I understood what she was trying to say. And I felt appropriately about all of the beings in the book to like get the message that she was trying to send across. And then reading them as an adult, you just get so much more out of it, and you see those connections to real life. And I agree with her that these days it feels like everything is propaganda. And maybe I shouldn't say these days, because it does, like, propaganda has existed forever, but it feels stronger when times are tougher, I think, the propaganda. And you notice it a lot more when you're scared. And I think a lot of us are scared. A lot of us are really scared about what's going on in the world right now. And you notice that propaganda and the people who are getting caught up in it when it scares you. And so I think propaganda has existed for a really long time. And that is how the few control the many. And that's why I am so, so excited for this book, because I just know that she's gonna wreck all of us with it. Just shine a spotlight on our own society and say, this is exactly what's happening. And there are so many people who aren't gonna get it and aren't gonna see the warning in it and aren't gonna change. And that's a horrible thought, and it's very scary, and I'm just gonna leave that there. So yeah, those are all my predictions for the new Hunger Games book. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think is gonna happen? Please give me some crazy ones. I wanna see what your more far-fetched theories are. I just think it would be so fun. If enough people comment some crazy theory, one of us has to be right. It's like the whole monkeys with a keyboard theory. If you give a monkey with a typewriter enough time to just press random keys, eventually they'll type the works of Shakespeare. If enough of us leave comments with our crazy random predictions, there's one single odd. There is one odd that one of us is right. It was a really funny way to word that. That wasn't a pre-planned joke. I just made myself laugh really hard anyway. It's possible that one of us gets something right, and I think that's really fun. So leave your predictions, the real ones and the crazy ones, down in the comments. Are you guys excited for the book? I'm super excited. I cannot believe we have to wait all the way until March of next year, but it'll go by quick, I'm sure. So don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye! Oh, wait. What do we think of the art? Do we think it's too cluttered? I'm wondering if it's too cluttered, like here on this wall specifically. I think this is fine, but I think I might have to like space these out a little bit more. What do you guys think? Okay, now bye.